running a business is like you're putting out constant fires, unexpected issues. And then when you finally feel like you've gotten everything just perfect, you've got, a number of days, weeks, months where everything's going well, the business is well, it's as though you open the door and you get smacked in the head by a 2x4.
There's new malware targeting smart TVs, preparing for the unpreparable, and smart sustainability solutions for residential. All that and more next on ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 435, Words Have Meaning.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek, a weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matthew Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Katye McGregor-Bennett. She's the president of KMB Communications and is already on site in Vegas for InfoComm 2024, I believe is the official hashtag, before I get berated online. How are you, Katye?
I'm great. And since it is 2024, I think you're probably in the right.
Then we've got my good friend, Alex Capecelatro. He's the founder of Josh.ai. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here again.
Hey, thank you for joining us. And obviously thank everyone else for joining us as well. Alex, just before we jump into the stories, you just got back from I believe I'm correct in saying this, the first Offsite CEDIA board meeting that took place over in California with a bunch of events that included members for the first time in, I don't know how long. Tell us a little bit briefly about the change in direction on board meetings, et cetera, and if that's going to continue going forward.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So for those who don't know, I'm on the CEDIA board, currently serving as the chair. And so it's been really great to be involved with CEDIA, but also helping to try to direct a little bit of where we're going. Everything I'm saying here is just, my word, my voice, not CEDIA's voice. So just want to make that clear. But from my perspective, CEDIA for a long time was not as engaged with membership as I feel like it could have been. There's a lot of great stuff that CEDIA does, but people don't always know, and people don't always feel like they're connected to the group. And so when we have board meetings, we have all of the executive staff that come out. We've got the board that come out. It's an international global board. And we just said, why don't we connect with members? Why don't we get together? So the first board meeting that we had this year was actually in Washington, D.C., where we had a lobby day. We did a lot of outreach, which was really great advocacy for the industry. And then this board meeting was in Los Angeles. And what was great about this was we just said basically the first night after the board meeting, we invited all of the CEDIA members in the region. So if you're listening and you're in Southern California and you did not get an invite, you probably have not renewed your membership. So be a CEDIA member. But we invited all of the CEDIA members and said, hey, free event, this is sponsored by CEDIA, sponsored by, myself. I hosted at my house. But we just got people together. And what was so great was we had people there who said, I had no idea that CEDIA was a global organization, and we thought it was just a US-centric organization. And they realized that when they were meeting board members and staff from the UK. And then we had someone else who said, this feels like the old days of CEDIA when it was about connection, about people, sharing what's going on in their world and helping each other's businesses. And we haven't had enough of that lately. And so I'm excited about trying to really keep this going where every CEDIA board meeting, we're going to try to be in a new city. We're going to try to connect with local members and really make sure that we're listening, hearing, and talking to the people out there, because CEDIA needs to be providing really good value. And I would argue we're not doing nearly enough today, but we're getting better. And I'm excited about that.
That's fantastic. Katye, do you have anything to add to that before we move on?
No, other than just full support for it. I'm really, really glad to see the board get out and be out in the regions and the territories where the members are and meeting the people where they are. You've heard me say that a million times on this program, and I really think it's really important. And I think it's important for the membership to see that the board is, how active the board is, but not just in the board room or on Capitol Hill doing other things, which is absolutely critical to our future. But I'd like to see more of this, and I hope that there's plans to do more of that. And Alex, you may have already touched on that, but if there's continuation of this?
Yeah, so I'll be the board chair for the next couple of years, and then I'll be the past chair after. So I'm going to keep pushing on this. I know I've got the full support of the board. We don't have locations figured out yet, but the plan is that I don't think we're going back to Indy for board meetings. There's no reason to be, locked up in the ivory tower when we can be out in the market.
Yeah, that's great to hear. All right, let's move on to our first story of the day. This comes to us from CE Pro. Malware is targeting smart TVs, and it is rising. They're also targeting set-top boxes, which is fantastic. The company DNS Watch service has found evidence of Pandora's Spear, which is an IoT bot that targets smart TVs running open source Android OS. It appeared in the list of the company's top 10 most widely detected malwares. Essentially, they're creating botnets based out of, again, these Android TVs and occasionally some set-top boxes as well, allowing them to use them as a botnet, but also occasionally substituting regular broadcasts with other footage. Katie, let me start with you on this. One, this is terrible news to hear. But two, not overly surprising that they're going after arguably one of the most widely used devices in TVs and set-top boxes, but also the ones that have arguably some of the worst security protocols out there. What do we do as an industry to spread the news on this and possibly deal with this in any way?
Well, okay, so my answer is always going to come from the role as a communicator, not of the technical side of the industry. Getting in front of this, I think, is what we need to be doing. It's tough because you also don't want to incite fear from your clients, but I think being in front of the situation and being open and transparent. These aren't products that any of us manufacture. These are products that we're selling based on the fact that we trust the manufacturer's doing the right thing and is not creating or leaving vulnerabilities in place that skilled hackers can get a hold of and wreak havoc on. I think the bigger thing is just that our industry needs to get much better at being fluent and comfortable in the conversation of the potential risks and vulnerabilities that other people's products can introduce into the built environment and what our role is to mitigate or eliminate. I don't really think there's much that we can say as far as eliminating, and I think that legal would probably say don't, but mitigating it and reducing the likelihood and increasing the expeditious nature of the rising to the threat and resolving it. Those are the things that our industries needs to be really, really strong on, is identifying, understanding, communicating, and resolving. So that, I think, to me is really, really clear. I don't know that there's much that we can do from the manufacturing side to prevent it. We just have to be better on the resolution side of it.
Alex, when you see this, when you follow this, obviously there are some things we can do from a network standpoint to control things. But in reading the article, the majority of the infections, if I can use that term, are coming from customers, end users, downloading updates, downloading additional software pieces or apps or all of those things that we tell them not to do, they're going to do anyways, and thus infect their systems. Is there much that we as an industry can actually do to lock these devices down or these networks down?
So I'm going to answer a little bit indirectly, but I think it's all related here. The first thought is, when I saw this article, I didn't make light of it because this is a serious thing, but I kind of smiled at the fact that everything is going to be hacked. If it has an internet connection, whether it's a camera, whether it's a speaker, whether it's a TV, it is going to be susceptible. And so when we think about the way that we design and develop products, we're always dealing with this give and take of how open do we make the ecosystem so that people can add all sorts of custom apps and features and whatnot, versus how locked down do you keep it so that you make sure it's safe. And this week, I remember seeing an article that I think it was Chow Mein put out a new driver for Control 4 on opening up Home Assistant. And I love Home Assistant. I think what they're doing is great. The problem is it's an open source ecosystem that enables you to connect any device into this network. And we're likely going to see, if enough people adopt this driver, at some point someone has figured out a backdoor through Home Assistant to basically get into the rest of your network. It's going to be bad. And so this just reminds me, we've always taken the approach at Josh that every integration that we work on is a very deep integration where we know the company, they know us, we test each other's products. We make sure that if either of us need to make any changes, we have a communication channel. And in the case of Android TV, they went very open. They said you can install really any app with, I don't believe, very much gating as to what goes onto the Play Store. And the net result is, yes, a consumer could easily download something that they shouldn't, or something that has malware that they don't know about. So, from the integrator's perspective, I don't think Android TVs are going away. I think we need to deal with the fact that they exist. I think we do have the ability to lock down, how the customer is engaging. So, for example, if an integrator sets up a TV to be offline, but they then use Apple TV as their main streaming, which is online, and you're using Apple's, approved apps in Apple TV, it's going to be very unlikely that your system is susceptible. And so that's not the right approach for everyone. I don't like to say you have to use this one product, but I do think we can start to really be mindful about what are the products and the systems that we're working with? How open are they to these possible susceptibilities? And if these do happen, what's our recourse? How do we quickly shut it down? And so I do think, there's certain tools that you can use to monitor the network, see what type of traffic is going in and out of the home. But in this case, this is going to look exactly the same as streaming on Netflix, for example. You're authenticating through an app for video content. The home is not easily going to be able to detect that that's going on. The nice thing is the TV is also unlikely to open up more access. So someone who's hacking a smart TV in this environment, they're probably not going to be able to access your smart lock, your alarm system, your garage door, at least the way that I understand this breach to be taking place. But there are a lot of other breaches, like the Home Assistant one I mentioned, where someone comes in through a back door, they might have access to your whole home. So I don't mean to be an alarmist, but the reality is we need to know these hacks can happen. We need to know that these hacks probably are already happening and we're not always aware of them. And we need to be really careful about the systems that we bring into the home and the ones that have a very open ecosystem where anyone can basically build an app, an integration, a feature. Those come with risk, and we need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, let's change topics for a second. This comes to us from Residential Systems and a good friend of the show, Mr. Henry Clifford, getting caught flat-footed. Go read through this article. Henry goes through, essentially, he got an email that came in announcing a home technology kind of like tabletop show in his market that he was shockingly not invited to, just due to the way those work, that it was some group that they weren't a member of, and how he and Livewire were able to rally the troops to come together and make this event happen. Alex, let me start with you on this. The concept of unexpected surprises and things kind of popping up out of nowhere that need some level of immediate attention is not uncommon. But is there a good way to create like a standard operating procedure for how to deal with these types of emergency pop-up things that may or may not have an actual impact on your business?
I read this article and was very skeptical of the overall premise, and I'll give what will hopefully be good feedback by the end, but I'll start with, I remember listening to a podcast a couple years ago that was talking about running a business is like you're putting out constant fires, unexpected issues. And then when you finally feel like you've gotten everything just perfect, you've got, a number of days, weeks, months where everything's going well, the business is well, it's as though you open the door and you get smacked in the head by a 2x4. There's always an unexpected something that is going to try to ruin your day, trying to throw a wrench in the mix, whether it's finance related, HR related, customer related, product related. There's so many things that we deal with. And so I like the idea about not getting caught flat-footed. I like the premise that if you have repeatable aspects of your business that you can plan for, you should plan for them. You should get ahead of them. You shouldn't be doing everything last minute. That being said, part of the way that I approach running a business is knowing that I'm going to wake up with the idea of a plan for the day. And very likely it is all going out the window because you get that one call that that person's quitting or that customer is having an issue or that vendor is not able to fulfill your order, whatever it is that's going on. And you have to react, you have to deal with it. So I do like that Henry is usually starting with a very good nugget. And that nugget is plan for the things that you can plan for. Don't get caught flat-footed if there's something that is important to your business that you can get ahead of. That being said, we all saw during COVID things that we could not have predicted, we could not have planned for. And I think staying agile and knowing that it's okay that you're going to get caught off guard, keep calm, do a yoga class with Katie, and then try to think about what's the best way to move forward. That's the way I approach things. So it's a little different than what the article suggests, but in my mind, you just can't predict most of the things that end up hitting you in a business.
We have a fun saying in our office on, like, it's in our photocopy room and all that kind of jazz of your shoot, I'm gonna get it wrong. Your inability to prepare properly does not constitute an emergency for me. Which is to a degree kind of, I think, where you're coming from, Alex. Katie, I think we, as to really like simplify our industry, we're service providers. I think we've really gotten caught up in this. The client is always right. And when they say jump, we'll say how high. Well, jumping. And I disagree with that. I think that there's a massive power in saying no. And again, I'm not necessarily going against what Henry's saying. In this situation, it was a marketing opportunity. Yeah, jump on those. That's important. But at what point do you have like a firm cutoff point of, if a client calls and says, oh, I'm moving houses tomorrow and I need people here? How do you determine the right cutoff point for when you will no longer solve these issues that, again, could have been dealt with in the past, to make that easier to deal with in the future?
There's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. I think understanding the type of clientele that you want to be doing business with that are good for your business, and not only in terms of the revenue that they generate, but the joy that they generate. And Alex, I think I can probably go back to you speaking on stage like maybe 8 years ago, and you were doing a talk about just love and the joy that technology can bring, or the lack thereof. And you were painting a picture for everybody in the room that day about the need to express the joy that technology can bring, but also be responsible about delivering it. The last part was how I interpreted the other side of the conversation. And so, Matt, kind of pulling that into your question, is I think that there's understanding the type of clientele that we want to have, that are generating revenue, that are creating joy for our team, and that are not the ones that are calling saying, you know what, my lack of planning, sorry, but now you have to scramble. There's a time and a place to accommodate that sort of a need, but there is also more of a time and a place to make sure that you stick to the schedule for the rest of the clients that you have and the things that you've scheduled and the additional trade partners that are involved in a project. Just because one client says they absolutely need your team tomorrow because they messed up, whether they would admit to that or not, but they messed up on their scheduling, and now everybody's got to drop everything to take care of them. What's the potential impact if you do say no? And I think you need to understand your business on a regular basis to be able to answer that question as fast as the situation arises. Can you afford to say no? Who is that client attached to in your book, that if one client is upset with you and they tell two friends and they tell two friends, are you just losing potentially that one client and the revenue there, or are you potentially losing a lot more? That kind of knowledge is what gives you the power to be able to say yes or no to any particular escalation, right? And how far your team needs to bend. It's also the role of who the person is in the company is being faced with it. They need to be empowered and enabled to be able to make the tough decisions that may impact the company, but should have a more positive impact for the team and the longevity of the company. A lot of these last minute decisions that end up being escalation points for anybody in our industry, and I think our companies the same, it happens all the time, where all of a sudden, oh shoot, we've got a website launching and we forgot to have you rewrite 3 pages. Okay, well, In that situation, no one's going to lose their life. We can probably accommodate because it doesn't need to be perfect right from the start. But in the case of the example that you provided, I mean, what is the impact? Does the client have to be out of the house tomorrow? If not, there's extenuating costs that start building because, they're moving, whatever those things are. You have to understand that who that client is and what it'll take to keep them happy and make sure that your team continues to have the joy. I bring up the team because we have such a lack of resources in our industry that we can't afford to have unhappy people on our team. And if you're constantly bowing to the client that didn't provide their schedule to your team, and now your team's having to pay the price in time and probably in short order, your team is going to break. When that happens, you lose talent because potentially you accommodated clients like this that just aren't providing the respect. I apologize for all the background noise. Of course, everybody was just walking by. So providing the respect back to your team is equally important. So it isn't really an easy answer, but I think if I were to consolidate it, is you need to understand who all of your clients are today and what the value is to your company and where and when you will provide some additional accommodation. And your stakeholders need to be enabled and empowered to be able to uphold that or to be able to bend it. And it's not easy, but you got to understand your business to be able to answer that question.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, let's hit our last story of the day real quick. This comes to us from CE Pro and Andy Rittenhouse. How smart interior shading solutions can fit into sustainable building strategies. In today's building design, daylight harvesting has become an integral part of healthy and sustainable strategies as it helps offset the need for electric light throughout the day. Go read through the article. It's a good article. It is heavily focused on the commercial side, but there's also some really good ties back into the residential opportunity in daylight harvesting and limiting solar gain, etc. Katie, when you see this, article, when you see the pitch, if you will, to promote motorized shading and the automation behind them under the guise of wellness and daylight harvesting and limiting solar gain and all of these things, is that the pitch that really adds value in the residential market, or is that an up and coming opportunity in the resi market?
So I think it's an up and coming opportunity. It's being realized in small ways already, but I do think it is an up and coming opportunity. But our industry needs to get a little bit more educated on the terminology and really what it means, and from an architectural standpoint, how the built environment comes to be, and are we really actually daylight harvesting? Are we, or are we applying technology to make it sound as though that's what we're doing? So I think there's, words have a meaning. And I think right now there's a lot of where we see the conversation going with sustainability, and particularly in this category, it is a little bit of a stretch, but it's a stretch in the right direction. The conversation has to start somewhere. And this is a really good category for the conversation to start. It's where it goes next that I think is really what gets much more interesting, but we're not there yet.
I agree with that. Alex, I'm really glad that Katie brought up the architectural factors, because in a commercial space, in your standard office building, all of these buzzwords, all of these technologies, all of these principles are usually fairly present. In the residential building practice, they're not. We very rarely have entire walls full of glass facing the right way to properly do that. There's just not usually the forethought given in the architectural aspect, from the architectural design aspect of a residence, into how light will play throughout the room from Mother Nature. Is that something that we can impact at all, or is that something that needs to come from the architectural, the build community?
We're always going to be limited by, working with the constraints of the architecture and the building. I think we certainly want the architects and the builders to be more mindful of this. And, we always say on the Josh side, if the builder could design up front, or not design, if the architect could design up front the home to flow in a way that we know the technology is going to be used, you would make very different decisions. But oftentimes it's hard to influence those conversations. And so the reality of the situation is most of us, we come into a structure that's done. We have to deal with the fact that walls are here, windows are there. This is the way that the home's laid out. And then our job is to basically make that home, as Katie alluded to, make it joyful, make it fun, make it relaxing. And so in some cases, artificial lighting can help do that. In other cases, the opposite. We had a client in New York where they had very big windows, a lot of natural sunlight, but they're an art collector. And they were worried that the sunlight coming in was going to destroy and damage their artwork. So in that case, adding motorized shades, it wasn't about getting more light. It wasn't about, daylight harvesting. It was about art protection and, building the right automation so that the time the sun would come in, the shades would close, it would protect the artwork. And so I think we just have to really understand joy is different for every client. In some cases, a lot of natural light is great. In other cases, they really want to be a net zero, sustainable home that utilizes as little energy as possible. In other cases, they're entertaining people all the time and they want to make sure the temperature is at the perfect temperature. The lighting is very good for entertaining. So, I think this article is specific about a number of applications that apply in commercial. I think looking at them on the residential side doesn't always work. But the main thing for me is whether it's shades, whether it's lights, whether it's music or any other feature in the home, we want to just really think about, are we delivering the result that the client is after? And we should make sure that we have that conversation. What do you care about, when you're in this home? And in some cases, sustainability and daylight harvesting might be things that people care about. And if that's the case, I do believe we as technology integrators can make a difference in that space, but we are limited, right? A finished home is only going to allow you to do so much in the space.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, let's wrap it up there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Alex, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Josh.ai, where can they do that?
You can always reach out directly, Alex@Josh.ai. Also active on LinkedIn, Instagram, and all the other socials.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Katie, my friend, if people want to connect with you, learn more about KMB Communications, where can they do that?
Best place to go is really LinkedIn. Find KMB Communications. We're the one with the mountain logo, or Katye McGregor-Bennett on LinkedIn or all the other socials as well.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter and X at Matt D. Scott and most other social platforms. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.